My daughter-in-law sold my father's watch for $300. Its real value was $180,000, and when I found out, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I smiled, because I already knew exactly what I was going to do. My name is Eleanor Hayes. I am 76 years old, and I have lived long enough to know that silence can be sharper than any knife. Let me tell you how a piece of metal on a leather strap nearly tore my family apart, and how it ended up saving us instead. The watch belonged to my father, Edward. He wore it every single day of his life, through 2 jobs, through raising 5 children on almost nothing, through the kind of poverty that teaches you the true worth of things. He never told anyone what it was really worth. To him, it wasn't about money. It was the one thing his own father had given him before he passed, an old pocket-turned wristwatch with a hand-engraved case, a movement so rare that collectors would later tell me men fly across oceans just to hold one like it. My father used to say, "Eleanor, when I'm gone, this watch goes to whoever loves this family the most, not whoever asks for it first." When he died, I was the one who kept it safe. I placed it in a small wooden box lined with velvet, tucked inside my dresser drawer, wrapped in the same handkerchief he used to carry it in. For 40 years, I looked at it every so often, remembered his voice, and put it back. It wasn't for sale. It wasn't for show. It was my father, still breathing in that little box. My son Michael married a woman named Vanessa about 6 years ago. I tried, truly tried, to love her the way a mother should love her son's wife. She was polite in front of people, always smiling at family dinners, always complimenting my cooking. But there was something underneath her smile that never sat right with me, a kind of hunger in her eyes whenever she looked around my house, like she was counting things, pricing things. Last spring, I fell and broke my hip. I had to stay at Michael and Vanessa's house for almost 2 months while I recovered, because my own home has stairs I couldn't manage. I brought some of my things with me, including that wooden box, because I didn't trust leaving it alone in an empty house. One afternoon, about 3 weeks into my stay, I asked Vanessa to bring me the box from my suitcase so I could look through some old photographs my father kept tucked beside the watch. She went pale. She said she would look for it later. Later never came. I asked again the next day. And the next. Each time, her excuses grew thinner, her eyes wouldn't meet mine. On the 4th day, I asked Michael directly if he had seen the box. He looked confused, said he hadn't touched my things. That night, I heard Vanessa and Michael arguing behind their bedroom door, voices low but sharp. I couldn't make out every word, but I heard watch and I heard I didn't know, and I heard my daughter-in-law crying. The next morning, Michael sat across from me at the kitchen table, unable to look me in the eye, and told me the truth. Vanessa had found the watch while unpacking my suitcase. She didn't know what it was. She thought it was just an old, heavy piece of costume jewelry, something outdated and useless taking up space. There was a man who came around the neighborhood buying second-hand jewelry, gold chains, old watches, broken bracelets, paying cash on the spot. Vanessa, drowning in credit card debt she'd hidden from my son for over a year, saw an easy $300 sitting in a velvet box. She sold it without asking anyone. Without even wondering why an old woman would keep something wrapped so carefully for 40 years. I did not raise my voice. I did not throw anything, though God knows I wanted to. I simply asked Michael for the name of the man who bought it, and the address of the shop he worked out of. Then I asked to be alone. That night, lying in the guest room of my son's house, staring at the ceiling, I thought about my father's hands, how they used to wind that watch every morning like it was a small ritual of respect. I thought about how easily 40 years of memory could be erased by someone who never even asked what it meant. And I decided, in that quiet dark room, that I was not simply going to let this go. I was going to find that watch, and I was going to make sure the world knew exactly what my daughter-in-law had thrown away. The next morning, I called my old neighbor's grandson, a sharp young man named Caleb who works in appraisals and antiques. I described the watch to him in detail, the engravings, the maker's mark hidden inside the case back, the serial number I still remembered because my father used to make me recite it as a child, like a secret code between us. Caleb's voice changed the moment I mentioned the maker's name. He asked me to send him a photograph if I had one. I did, an old picture of my father wearing it at my wedding decades ago. Within an hour, Caleb called back, and his voice was shaking. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, "if this is what I think it is, and if it's in good condition, that watch could be worth somewhere between $150,000 and $200,000. Maybe more, depending on the buyer." I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time after he hung up. Not because of the number, though it took my breath away, but because of everything that number represented. My father's whole life, sold for $300 to a man who probably melted it down or flipped it to a dealer within a week for a fraction of its worth. I did not tell Vanessa what Caleb had told me, not yet. I wanted to see how far the lie would stretch on its own. I asked Michael to take me to the pawn shop the buyer worked out of. The owner, a tired-looking man named Robert, remembered the transaction the moment I described the watch. He told me he'd paid $300 for it. Because the young woman who sold it seemed desperate and didn't ask questions, and he hadn't looked closely enough to realize what he was holding. He'd already sold it 2 days later to a private collector who came through town, for $4,000, thinking he'd made a brilliant profit. $4,000. Still nowhere close to its true worth, but it told me the watch was already gone, passed into hands I might never trace. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not defeat. Determination. I spent the next several days quietly building a case, the way my father used to say I could when I put my mind to something. I got Robert to give me the name of the collector he'd sold it to, a man 2 states away who ran an online auction business specializing in rare vintage watches. I called Caleb again, and together we tracked the piece to an upcoming private auction listing, already priced at $180,000, with photographs that showed my father's engraving clear as day. When I finally showed Michael the listing on Caleb's laptop, my son went silent for a long moment before he put his head in his hands. That evening, he told Vanessa everything, in front of me, without softening a single detail. I watched her face crumble, watched the color drain from it as the true weight of what she'd done finally landed. $300. $180,000. My father's whole existence, nearly erased by carelessness and shame she'd been too afraid to admit. Here is where I could tell you I made her suffer, that I let this destroy her marriage, that I turned every family gathering into a courtroom where she stood accused for the rest of her life. Some part of me, in those early days, wanted exactly that. I wanted her to feel as small as I felt when I opened that empty velvet box. But then Vanessa did something I did not expect. She came to me alone, without Michael, without excuses prepared. She told me the truth about the debt she'd been hiding, thousands of dollars she owed from medical bills years before she met my son, bills she was too proud and too frightened to admit to anyone, including her own husband. She told me she'd been drowning quietly for over a year, terrified that if Michael knew, he would see her as a burden instead of a wife. She said selling the watch wasn't about greed. It was about panic, about a woman so used to hiding her fear that she stopped asking questions about anything that might expose it. She didn't ask me to forgive her. She said she didn't expect me to. She only wanted me to know the truth, because she said I deserved that much, even if nothing else could be fixed. I sat with her confession for 3 days before I decided what kind of woman I wanted to be in this story. I could have let bitterness win. I could have spent whatever years I have left reminding her, every holiday, every dinner, every quiet moment, of what she took from me. But my father did not raise me to hoard pain the way some people hoard money. He taught me that forgiveness isn't about pretending something didn't happen, it's about refusing to let it own you. I contacted the auction house through Caleb and explained the situation, that the watch had been sold without knowledge of its worth by a family member in financial distress, and that I was the rightful heir of the original owner. It took weeks, lawyers, documentation, more patience than I thought I had left in me, but eventually the collector agreed to sell it back, at a price far lower than the auction listing, once he understood the story behind it and, I suspect, once he realized the publicity of a stolen family heirloom wasn't good for his reputation. I used almost every cent of my own savings, money I'd set aside for my final years, to buy back my father's watch. Michael wanted to help pay, but I refused. This was between me and my father's memory. When the package finally arrived at my door, I sat alone at my kitchen table and opened it slowly, the way you open something sacred. There it was, exactly as I remembered it, ticking softly in my hands like it had never left. I did not scold Vanessa when I saw her next. Instead, I asked her to sit with me, and I told her about my father, things I had never shared with anyone in the family, how hard his life had been, how much shame he carried over money he never had, how that watch was the one beautiful thing he owned in a life full of struggle. I told her that shame, left alone in the dark, grows into decisions we regret. I told her I understood fear better than she thought. Then I did something that surprised even me. I offered to help her pay off what remained of her debt, quietly, without Michael knowing the exact number, so she could stop carrying that weight alone. She cried harder in that moment than when she confessed to selling the watch in the first place. I think it was the first time in years someone had chosen to help her instead of judge her. Today, the watch sits back in its velvet box in my dresser drawer, exactly where it belongs. Vanessa knows its story now, every detail, every ounce of what it means. Last month, on what would have been my father's 99th birthday, she asked if she could see it, and I let her hold it for the first time, gently, the way you hold something you finally understand. Our family isn't perfect. We still have hard days, still have moments where old hurt bubbles up unexpectedly, but we are closer now than we were before any of this happened, because secrets stopped living in our house, and honesty moved in instead. My father always said the real value of something isn't the number attached to it. It's what it teaches the people who come after you. I believe, in his own strange way, he taught my family that lesson one final time, through a watch that traveled from a velvet box, to a pawn shop, to an auction listing, and finally back home again, right where it started. If you made it this far, I want to know where you're from, so type your city down in the comments below. I read every single one of them. And if this story touched your heart even a little, if you love your grandma the way I hope your grandchildren will one day love me, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this with someone who needs a reminder that forgiveness is stronger than revenge. I'll see you in the next story.